At this time, we'll take a motion to approve the minutes for December 11th.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the minutes of December 11th. Any changes, questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Minutes are approved. Can we have a motion on the consent agenda?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the consent agenda. I'll just simply note that item 22 has been removed. Other than that, anybody else? Seeing none, ready for the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Consent agenda is adopted. Takes us to our public hearings. Madam Clerk, item 24A, please.
It's an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title V, Administrative Code, Chapter 30, Administrative Code, Article 30-3, Boards and Commissions, Economic Development Advisory Council.
Mr. Manager.
Members of the council, I do not have anything to add to the report. I think the major references in the second to last paragraph in terms of the desire to go to a business strike force model. Be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions for the manager? Councilor Floyd.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm wondering, could you explain a little more, in a little more detail, exactly how the strike force is going to work, who's going to be appointing members of that, if there's going to be any council participation on that strike force?
The strike force will vary in its membership depending on, and they'll be, think of it more as an ad hoc groups to deal with specific issues that come up. If anything that's going to last any period of time, what we would do is we'd come to the city council and ask for direction on what the issue we think needs to be addressed, or obviously the council could tell staff what they think the issue needs to be addressed and put together the appropriate members. But for the vast majority of times, it will be dealing with particularly what we'd like to focus on is attracting business and working with existing businesses, and therefore that would be done by me, and the community development director would be appointing people to that, primarily from the private sector. And but if there are people who on the city council who would like to be part of standing members of this, then I'd certainly accept that from the city council. But the idea is to bring people with specific knowledge sets to the specific issue instead of having somebody, a generalist, be involved with all issues.
If I may follow up?
Sure.
Thank you, Ron. So what I envision is that people who would be supportive of a particular project or have knowledge in a particular field would be part of that strike force, depending on what project was potentially coming to the city. The question I would have is where do we get an opposing? I don't want to see just. I don't want somebody there just for the sake of saying no. But do we have somebody who might pull back the reins a little bit and say, yeah, this is a good project that's worked well in other communities, but it may not be the right fit for the city, as opposed to just having people who are acting, for lack of a larger vocabulary, as cheerleaders for. So not that there's any
No, understood. So you want to have a balance.
Yes.
That's the whole idea. And the idea would be to work on items that the city council or the community and city council over the years has said this is where we'd like to focus. But generally, as you know, most of those things that we end up coming back with, so say it's a 79E proposal or something to do with land that the city owns, or any type of project, generally it comes back to some sort of city board or commission, or you're running it through Fiscal Policy Advisory Committee or the city council, and therefore you'd get that, not only the public disclosure of what that individual project is going to be, but you'd have to have some sort of action that would be taking place. But if it was simply as, we'd like to see this type of, let's say there was a certain type of business that we wanted to have in downtown Concord or in downtown Pennacook, that the city council has already said over the years, working with, say, in town or the chamber, this is what we'd like to have happen, then I wouldn't see any need to come back to the city council and say, hey, we would like to go to talk to these 3 businesses scattered around the country. Are you okay with that? We would go off and do that and pull in leaders throughout the community that we think would help us make that happen. And if there is something, in addition to that, the idea would be, I would like to have our economic development folks and community development folks come back to the city council on a periodic basis. We could do it quarterly, we could do it every other month, however you like it, and report on what we've been doing, what the focuses have been, and anything that's not confidential, we could talk to you at that time and get constant feedback to make sure we're on the right track and not going off someplace there. Either still could be good, but you want us to focus on something else.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Council Cohen?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to be clear in my own mind about when I heard the term project in this regarding this, I look at this as more as it's part of economic development, bringing in private business, or it could be a nonprofit, but it's more business oriented than a project as I traditionally see it here, like a Main Street project or some other thing. This is going out recruiting companies and businesses to locate or expand in Concord. Is that
When I was using the term project, I was thinking in a more economic development sense that if, for example, we have a piece of property up at the airport industrial park, we would go and try to get a project to move into and work on a project that would actually use that property in the appropriate way, working with, say, CRDC.
okay? So I'm sorry, but when you said project,
Yes.
is that a business?
It could be, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
In this case, in that case, it would be a
And
business.
so the difficulty I find is that what I heard Councilor Hirschlag say is that would it be good to have some opposing views at the table? So if you're bringing in a business or promoting a business to come into Concord, that you're really selling the city of Concord on that. And so I don't know how it works when you have someone opposed to having the business come in.
I think I would answer it this way.
Thank you.
Every situation is unique. The one who I think is where Councilor Hirschlag, and put in my own words, kind of holding people's feet to the fire, making sure it's the best interest of the community, that's our responsibility. But there may be situations where, and for full disclosure, this is something that I actually talked to Rich Uchida about when he was practicing law here in the city of Concord and the state of Hampshire. He was up in Waterville, Maine, at Colby College, and they were having problems in their community, attracting businesses, and so they were attracting students, and they were able to set up this kind of strike force model. So if you saw a particular employer who may be interested in coming to the city, then they went to folks within the city who was here already and said, who are the best people to go be the advocates for the city? So it's not always the folks who work for the city. Sometimes it could be an employer like a Delta Dental. It could be somebody from the arts community like the music school. It could be whoever the right person is at the right time. If it was somebody an organization who are very interested in a younger workforce and they wanted to make sure there was plenty of recreation activities, I'd bring in the bicycle community, bring in the trail community. Really depending on what the appropriate thing is at the time. But probably an easy example, I think we're going to do this anyway. And tonight we're going to be talking about the form-based code zoning project update. And you see in that update, it talks about the folks are going to come in and they want to talk to and do interviews with stakeholders, developers, property owners, neighborhood residents, development professionals, various boards, and I think that's why the comments I tried to make earlier tonight about being a collaborative effort and making sure people are all included. This strike force concept in my mind is one to make sure we're finding the right people, to make sure everyone's included, not just some particular group of people from EDAC. And EDAC did a great job for many, many years. It had some highs and lows over the years, but they had people appointed from very specific organizations. And I think because it only met once a month, it wasn't as nimble as we really need to be in, I think, the fast-paced, moving arena of economic development that we find ourselves in. So that's part of the kind of background that I see. If that helps answer.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, let's open the public hearing on this item. Does anyone wish to testify? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. I'll simply add that we did receive a correspondence from Mr. Tim Bernier. Did you all receive that?
Yes.
Yes. Just want to make sure that was on the record as well. Madam Clerk, item 24B, please.
It's an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title V, Administrative Code, Chapter 35, Classification and Compensation Plan, Article 35-2, Compensation Plan.
Mr. Manager.
The members of the council, the proposal here is, as you know, we've had the long-tenured Deputy General Services Director has retired. And what we'd like to do, the proposal that you have in front of you, is to consolidate the current duties and responsibilities of the business manager position and a solid waste manager position into a new position titled Administrative Division Manager. Also, would like to establish a second new position, the Assistant Administrative Manager, and vacate the current Business Analyst position within the department. So in essence, we're taking 3 administrative managerial positions and making 2 positions out of that. The department proposes to also establish a new entry-level workforce labor position titled Maintenance/Operations Flex Technician. It's the intention of this new position to provide an entry-level career development position. They'll be trained in the areas of work performed by the Highways and Utility Division, Public Properties Division, the Administrative Division, which is water metering and backflow, and the Equipment Services Division, and up to 8 6-week cycles for a period of up to a year that was designated to be ultimately lead to a full-time position in one of the 3 divisions. Upon successful transition of the Maintenance Operations Flex Technician to the employment in one of the operation divisions, a new candidate will be hired into the career development position to keep ready and develop a potential candidate for subsequent openings. Through the realignment of senior managerial administrative staff, the department is able to provide additional direct labor to enhance public services and improve staff development with no increase in full-time employment equivalents and a savings to the general fund. And it's estimated the current budget will realize an estimated savings of $65,000 by establishing these positions and implementing the realignment in the General Services Department. One of the things we can achieve through the efficiencies that we now have within the department and the excellent hires that Chip Chesley has made over time is that the division heads are very strong. They can carry the work that's necessary in those divisions. And between that and the technology pieces that you've invested and put into place, we can streamline the organization, be much more efficient, and save the taxpayers money. And at the same time, create a workforce development program where we can actually bring folks into the organization, get them into the right places at the right time, and save the taxpayers money. Glad to answer any questions.
Any questions, Councilor Schlag?
Thank you, Your Honor. So this is an entry-level position, a training position. If they went on to be hired full-time at an entry-level position in one of the departments, what would the salary difference be, the step difference be?
It would depend on which grouping they went into, but generally what happens is, Chip, did you want to come up? Generally what happens is when you're moving from one pay scale to another, I believe it's a 5% increase on what your entry-level salary is. So the person wouldn't be here in this position for very long.
Right.
So it would be a minimal increase, and we costed that out, which is when we came up with $65,000, we figured that out. But was that accurate in terms of?
Pretty good. There's not much more I can add.
So if they were moving, I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Okay.
So if they were moving from this training position to an entry-level position, the salary would it be the same step, or would it depend what department it was in, or?
I think for the most part that may realize a 2.5% to 5% increase.
Okay.
Any other
Thank you.
questions? Mr. Chesley, good to see you as always.
Good to see you.
You for the next one?
Alabama,
Thank you.
Georgia.
Georgia. The answer is Georgia.
Okay.
Just saying.
Just checking in.
And since you're here, please share our appreciation with the folks who are out working at all hours, holidays, who are doing an incredible job at keeping our streets safe.
We'll do that. We're lucky to have them.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing on this item. Does anybody wish to testify? Probably shouldn't have done that. Mr. Schweiker.
First day on the job?
Yeah. There you go. Good evening, welcome.
Hello, mayors, members of city council, city manager, city clerk. I'm Roy Schweiker, and I know you're going to find this strange, but I don't like the idea that you found this way to save $65,000 because I think you could do something better. I'll give you two options for this, one of which will, save far more money, and one of which will be transformative to the city. But the first thing I want to say is, in spite of, this sounds like a good idea, but I'm not sure what the department doesn't already have too many laborers. I mean, I was out this fall watching 5 people do the work of 2, vacuuming up leaves. They are frozen to the ground. There was a guy with a shovel trying to scrape them loose. He couldn't get them all. No, we need to find a better system for that, and maybe if they had fewer laborers that do it. But at any rate, I'll save that for the city budget hearings. But at any rate, my one idea is, instead of leaving this position in the General Services Department, we go back to the last summer's budget where we took a position from the parking enforcement and added it to the General Services for downtown. And so what I'd like to do is take a position from General Services and put it back into the parking enforcement, because essentially the neighborhoods get no parking enforcement due to the lack of that position. In particular, I'd like to see this position used only when the meters are not enforced. Weekends, evenings, so forth, have us, rotating around schedule to, help out the neighborhoods, even help out downtown wherever it's needed with, not the same hours every week, because if you only got a part-time job, you can't work the same hours every week and cover it. But if you covered, different hours every week, you could pretty well deal with a lot of the parking issues. And there's some similar issues that may not be directly parking, but have to do with neighborhoods. As an example, the street I live on, some of you got a message, if you were unfortunate enough to be either an at-large councilor or a ward councilor for the ward I'm in, that it's unsafe trying to pull out of the street because a private business has plowed snow up to the white line on the edge of the main street, so you can't see coming out of the street. And if you had this individual with a Jeep that could run around during snowstorms and watch for people who are plowing snow into the city right away or on the sidewalks and stuff, that would be an easier way to curtail it than trying to figure out who might have done it afterwards. We have the famous hanging wire, which is still there. It's been there nearly a year. They removed a telephone pole and hung a wire from a dead tree. The landlord would love to cut down that dead tree so pieces don't fall on his cars or on other wires, but he can't cut down his dead tree as long as that rope is hanging up. So once again, if you had somebody that was able to travel around the city and deal with these things and not just go around and look at parking meters, I think having a parking enforcement officer instead. And we've discovered from the parking stuff that in fact these people pay for themselves in the citations they can issue. So in fact it would cost you nothing to convert this back to a parking enforcement officer, and it would save you 100% of what the position was in General Services. So at any rate, that's my one idea for how you could better utilize this extra position.
Thank you very much.
My second one is transformative.
My apologies. John, too.
And this is something I've been talking about for a long time, is we really need a neighborhood official to help people in neighborhoods with various problems in the neighborhood. I mean, we talk about all these narrow streets, we've been talking about them for years, but nothing happens with them. And I think instead of putting this in economic development where they're too busy with other things, probably General Services is a better place for it, because a lot of the issues have to do with things like roads, how you can manage them better. So I'd like to see this thing made, perhaps more expensive than a person that goes around and reads meters. Someone who can consult with neighborhood residents, look at things, try and make our neighborhoods better. We're spending a lot of money downtown to make 5% of the city better. I think it would be nice to have somebody who was looking at the other 95% of the city to try and improve it. I think General Services is the correct department to put it in. And so I'd really like, if you want to spend the money for this position, instead of bringing back the parking enforcement officer, a higher level official who would spend their time trying to help out the neighborhoods would really be a good idea. This is the place to put it. You have the position now, let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Knight.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Strike, what do you think about if we were to have that neighborhood position as a volunteer from that particular ward?
Well, another idea I had that I might bring up at budget time is instead of giving $30,000 to In-Town Concord, give $3,000 each to an ombudsman in each of the 10 wards so that these people get some compensation. And I don't object to your idea of having a volunteer in each ward. I just have the feeling that the city ignores volunteers, whereas if they were on the staff, they would first off have a little bit more clout, and they'd receive some compensation for their time. So I won't disagree with that idea. I mean, we used to have a gentleman here who spent a lot of time in his ward. I guess Councilor Bennett used to chase around and find people with parking violations and so forth. But I guess a lot of the current councilors have got more full-time jobs and don't quite have the time to go out and issue parking tickets in person. So, it would be nice to say, well, you don't need this because the ward councilors will do it, but, it's not happening. And I'm suggesting if you had someone in the city, maybe with some technical knowledge or some enforcement ability, they would do far better than a volunteer. But hey, if you get me a volunteer in each ward, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. Not seeing any more questions. Appreciate it. Good to see you as always. Happy New Year. Anyone else wishing to testify on this item? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. Takes us to our action phase. Madam Clerk, item 25, please.
An ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title V Administrative Code, Chapter 30 Administrative Code, Article 30-3, Boards and Commissions, Economic Development Advisory Council.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Councilor Schley.
I'd like to offer an amendment that we have some standing, that there would be council members on the strike force, and that the number of members and who they would be determined at a future date, but that there would be, when the strike force was assembled, there would at least be one or two counselors that would be able to participate right from the onset of a project or a business coming into the community.
Help me understand where you're going, because what this ordinance does is strikes the existing ordinance, so there's nothing remaining.
I'm sorry.
So there'd be no ordinance anymore.
I understand
right?
that.
So I'm trying to figure out what you're amending.
So what I'd like to see is that what's being talked about now is that there'll be a strike force that will be assembled by economic development, depending on the project or whoever comes into the community. What I would like to see is that the city council, that we would select a number of members, whether it's one or two, or that would participate whenever that strike force came together for a particular project. So let's say business, Acme Stamps is looking to come into Concord. Our economic development director assembles a number of people from the community that would either benefit from that or would be able to promote the city and explain why it would be beneficial for Acme to come into the city. And then there would also be one or two council members that would be participating at that stage as part of that strike force.
Well, I guess the way I respond to it is, I don't really see the need to entertain an amendment like that, because I would assume that depending on, let's say it's a new business coming into the city, and they would want to locate in Ward 2, then I would assume that you would probably be included in the team because that's your ward. If they wanted to go to Pennacook, I would assume that it'd be Councilor Todd who would be participating. But in many of these projects, we have the final say. And I think to simply, I think the goal is to find the right people for the right situation. So I don't know that you have to say there has to be a counselor per se, because I think they're probably going to be there anyway, depending on the circumstance that arises.
So I'd be willing to reword that based on your suggestion that a member of the council, depending on the location of the project, would be invited to participate. in the strike force.
Sure, okay. Council Credit.
Thank you, Your Honor. I believe what's before us is just to eliminate this ordinance, is that
Correct.
correct? And it
That's
has
correct.
nothing to do with the strike force at this time, though a recommendation by city staff to actually write an ordinance that's relative to the strike force could come forward later, correct?
That's the way I understand it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Hirschlag.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm just a little uncomfortable removing the Economic Development Advisory Committee without a clear understanding of the membership. I know the manager did an excellent job of answering my question earlier, but I'd like to have some assurance that going forward, that there is some council involvement earlier on as opposed to towards the end of the process.
Let me ask you a question, Councilor Hirschlag. Do you think EDAC, as currently written in the ordinance, is effective, is efficient, and would you rather it to continue?
So I don't think I'm qualified to answer that question. What I have seen is that EDAC has taken on limited responsibilities over the last few years. It certainly appears to be a bit unwieldy, I think is the right term. It seems to be a much too large committee, and it appears that the way the committee is established, that it creates a lot of difficulty, a lot of layers in finding the appropriate, in filling the appropriate membership. So I
So you're not in
agree
favor,
that
so you don't think it's
I
effective the
don't
way
think
it
it's an
currently exists?
efficient. I don't think it's an efficient way for us to continue moving forward with economic development through EDAC.
But you'd rather keep that than move to something more nimble?
That's not what I said.
Help me understand what you said.
So what I said is I'd like to see us move in concert with eliminating EDAC and establishing some parameters for the strike force.
I guess I see it evolving over time, and I see it becoming something that we're probably going to learn. We may make a few mistakes along the way, but I think that it will be more effective than what currently exists in terms of responsiveness and timely. And that does take nothing away from the good work that the folks at EDAC have done over the years. Is there a second to Councilor Hirschlag's motion? Okay, seeing none. So we do have a motion before us to approve this item. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, ready for the question, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Madam Clerk, item 26, please.
An ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title V, Administrative Code, Chapter 35, Classification and Compensation Plan, Article 35-2, Compensation Plan.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Is there any discussion? I will just simply add, I felt with this one, as I communicated with the manager, that I needed one of those John Madden kind of play-by-play to figure out where everyone was going and who was moving to what. But I think you did an excellent job with your explanation. I appreciate your efforts to save the taxpayers money. I appreciate your efforts to create a better work environment for the folks at General Services, to be more effective with their time, and to create opportunities for growth within the department. So I commend you. I would just simply also add that I will support this, but I always appreciate when you bring these changes in during the budget process. So although this is a little unique for me, I think this is well worth it, and we should move forward. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to comment on something that Mr. Schweiker said about having an ombudsman, and I consider myself that for Ward 10 as a ward city councilor, and if I'm not the one driving around looking at a tree branch on the ground or drainage not doing something properly, somebody's calling me about it, and I'm then passing it on to Mr. Espel or Mr. Chesley, and they're always responding. And
Daily sometimes.
Right, exactly. And so
Appreciate that.
So, and I don't get $3,000 a year either, but we do it, and I'm assuming that the other councilors do the same thing because we care about the city and we want to serve our constituents, and that's why we run. So I definitely agree with Mr. Schweiker. I just want to let him know that, at least for my ward, that's something that I take on.
Council 9.
Related to what Councilor St. Hilaire just said, I was wondering, Mr. Manager, how we could deputize people in the city to hand out tickets that aren't police officers.
I've asked to be able to do that, and they won't even let me do it. So that's not going to happen. So.
Anyone else? I just appreciate it. Mayor Pro Tem, the fact that you made those comments, because that's exactly what I was running through my head was, we have really 10 really good ward councilors who do this all the time. I think are very effective with it. I can tell you just this weekend, I know the manager really enjoys this. I send him pictures or bring him pictures on Monday of streets and conditions of roads. He likes the visuals, right?
I do. It helps me understand where you are. So I know where you are at all times.
Find my friends.
And I did actually go down Chapel Street where Mr. Schweiker lives, and I took some pictures of things that he was talking about. And I think that perhaps we should consider banning all parking on Chapel Street, considering it's 18 feet wide. The snowbanks are there today. And, you know, we have worked with that neighborhood on 2 different occasions over the past several years. We've tried to accommodate their desires both times, and we still run into problems where people are parking across from each other's driveways and such. So I don't know how to regulate, you know, human behavior like that. You'd hope that people would be courteous and with their neighbors, but maybe Mr. Schweiker, perhaps he should talk to his neighbors and see if we just should have banned parking on that street. So I don't know what the answer is, but he's got a point. It's a very, very narrow road. So we'll see what happens. Anyone else? All right, we have a motion to approve. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And the ayes have it. Takes us to our reports. Item 27, Madam Clerk.
A form-based code zoning project update from the city planner.
Okay, new rule for 2018. If you're sitting in the audience and you see that your item is next on the agenda, you're going to come up here to the front row and wait up here. How's that? Okay?
She's been waiting all month to get up here, so.
And if you're David Gill and you're still sitting in the back room, then you have to run to the front because you're recreation.
Or you need to run?
Only if you're David Gill.
Is this turned on?
Uh-oh.
Did I just turn it on?
No.
There we go.
Another rule's coming. Turn your computer on.
What's my next criteria?
We're only one session into the year.
Thank you for having me. Wanted to give you a quick update. I really just have a calendar that I'm hoping will come up here while I'm waiting for this computer to...
Is the projector even
You
on?
need the projector.
Oh, it's not even hooked up. Okay. Thank you for your help.
Carlos has the remote.
So in fiscal year 18, council allocated funds to update and revise our zoning code and transition to a form-based code for some districts. So it is proposed as a 2-year process. The first year being really more focused on the downtown Concord and downtown Pennacook and the residential neighborhoods close into there. So we spent basically October and November interviewing candidates, and we chose a consultant, Code Studio from Austin, Texas. They're a really great firm, tons of experience. We're really excited to work with them. So we've been speaking with them since that time. The contract was actually signed in the end of November. Are you coming? Okay. Ignore the man behind them. Oh, and I guess I have to...
You look good on camera there, buddy.
Yeah.
Your best side.
Wait.
I don't know why you didn't want to retake pictures.
Camera head's 10 pounds, Tom.
So we've been communicating with them for the past month or so to try to coordinate and organize their first visit here and the kickoff meeting. So that kickoff meeting is scheduled for the first week the week of the 5th, February 5th. And the purpose of that visit is threefold. They're
Keep going.
okay. They're here to tour the city with staff. They're here to have a kickoff meeting with the public, and they're here for stakeholder interviews. So it's a packed 3 days that they're going to be here doing interviews. I have currently about 13 slots, interview slots scheduled for stakeholders. As Mayor Boulay noted, I'll just read off, the stakeholders are intended to be downtown developers and property owners, because again, this is focused on downtown Concord and downtown Pennacook and the neighborhoods close in. So those property owners and developers, neighborhood residents, development professionals, and representatives of the various boards, commissions, committees, including planning board, zoning board, and city council. And so in order to efficiently get through all of that, one idea that we had was to have a special meeting during that time that they'll be here, and so basically just one after the other for around an hour each. We have a special meeting for planning board, council, and zoning board, at which time the consultants would be here basically having a public meeting and interview session with you all, asking you about development and what's good, what's not good. I have a list of questions. So that would be ideally February 6th, which would be a Tuesday evening. The other evening, Wednesday evening, would be the kickoff meeting, which would be for the public, for all the board, everybody who participated in the stakeholder interviews, members of the public. That would be everybody. I've contacted the newspaper, so hopefully we'll be able to get something in the paper to advertise it. And so that would be the second evening. So that's the plan so far, to get the consultants out here and get them familiar with the community, basically introduce them to everybody and get feedback, and that's how they'll get started. I have a schedule. Wow, I did not know this would take so long. So I just wanted to show you the schedule. Let's see if perfect timing. It's in here. Are there any questions in the meantime while we're waiting for the schedule to come up?
Why don't you just tell us about the schedule?
Yeah, here it's coming.
It's not connecting.
What's not connecting?
No, why don't you just tell us about the schedule?
Okay, I've got it right here. So it's basically the schedule the consultant came up with, to your schedule. I wanted to show you all the cute little icons on the schedule.
Right. Keep going.
Is it working? Okay,
Yep,
no.
keep going.
So the first month is obviously the kickoff. So the first 3 months is basically the first phase of the project. They're calling it project initiation. They're going to come up with a website, so there'll be a website dedicated for this project. They'll do an assessment. They'll come up with an engagement plan, which will be their tools that they use, strategies that they use for public outreach and communicating information to the public, and also getting feedback from the public. They'll be doing a code assessment, which is basically evaluating our current code and making this kind of existing conditions on our current code. Then they'll be drafting a community character document, which will end up being the foundation, the basis and the foundation for the typologies for the form-based code. And they'll be creating a strategy report, which is basically their proposal and their presentation to us about how they're going to go about accomplishing this task. So that's in the first 3 months. Then the fourth month will be their next visit, and then that will be basically confirmation of the vision that they've come up with based on everything that they've done up to that point and everything that we've reviewed up to that point. So this is what can we zoom in here?
Just in time.
Yeah. So this first 3 month here is what I just explained to you. So the kickoff, the website, the engagement plan, the code assessment, community character strategy report, and the vision confirmation will be their next visit. So that'll be in 3 or 4 months from now, where they will again have another public meeting, and we'll evaluate where we are at that point. So you can see I've crossed out at the top there, since we're starting in February instead of October, what the timeline is on this first year. So basically, I just wanted to give you that update, let you know where we are, and that we're hoping to schedule you all for some stakeholder interviews. And hopefully you'll be able to participate in that, as well as the kickoff meeting that we're going to have.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions for our city planner? Start with Councilor Todd.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you for the presentation, and I, for one, am really looking forward to delving into this and seeing what we come up with, what might be a good fit for our city. One question that comes up, as you, I'm sure, are familiar, Pennacook went through this exercise several years ago with a grant that we received, and there was some outcome and reports. Are you considering this to be a fresh start, or is any of that material going to...
No, they'll be building on all of that.
Okay, because I do get that question from folks, and so I'll be able to answer them appropriately.
We won't be starting over again.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Schlag.
Thank you, Your Honor. So first I'll ask, where will this be posted on the website, and where? not only the schedule, but the information as it becomes available? Will there be a designated spot under planning, or will there?
Sure. So there'll be a designated website just for this project, and so there should be links from wherever we decide to put those links. Yes, it should be on the planning webpage. I believe that we're now in the process of reorganizing our website or kind of giving an update. So through that process, yes, there'll definitely be a link to this.
So if somebody went to the planning page on the city website, there would be a link to
the project website.
Project
correct.
website. Thank you, Your Honor. I noticed with some of the other projects.
Okay. Don't think we need to make any vote. Just thank you for the presentation. There's no new business. Unfinished business, item 28. I have been asked by the applicant to have an up or down vote on this particular item, and I said that I would bring this to you all tonight. I believe you all received correspondence from the applicant, a 3-page email or so. So with that, is there anyone willing to remove this from the table? Council 9.
I move to remove it from the table.
Second.
Motion made and seconded and thirded to remove this from the table. Ms. Shank, you want to come back? And Matt,
Run.
and Mr. Walsh, are you involved? Yep. I'll tell you, and while they're making the way up, I'm going to have the clerk read the unfinished business item.
It's a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a license agreement with Associated Enterprises to install a balcony and related improvements within the North Main Street right-of-way. And it was tabled at your May 8th, 2017 council meeting.
I'm going to take a shot at summarizing this very, very quickly, and please feel free to fill in any gaps that I miss. The applicant went to filed an application with the city, went to architectural design review. They made recommendations to the planning board. The planning board took this up. They made a recommendation to the city council. We took it up in May. We chose not to take either a favorable or unfavorable action on this item. Instead, we tabled it and we sent it back to the planning board, asked the planning board to discuss this and other things along Main Street. And if we're going to, and Councilor Kretovic, I think you were the one who removed it, so if I don't characterize it right, please help me as well. But to go back and to look at all balconies and what they are in terms of moving forward with the city, if you're over the public right-of-way. The planning department, have had several meetings between the planning board, architectural design review, and others. You've come back with recommendations, but it is a draft at this point. At that point, the applicant approached me and said that they were waiting on the decision from the city. They had builders and other folks, professionals who were looking to get going one way or another. So I invited them to the city with their professionals. They joined myself, Ms. Shank, and Mr. Bahia. We answered several of their questions regarding windows as well as the balcony, and it was at that time they requested that the city council give them a decision one way or another based on the application that was pending. And a lot of it had centered around, help me with this, the fact that they were engaging with these professionals to get moving on the project, and they didn't want to hold off any longer. So hopefully that was a fair summary. Did I miss anything?
Nope, that was perfect.
Nothing to add, Your Honor. Nothing to add.
So I guess I ask you, what is your pleasure with this particular application for a permit for a balcony over the city sidewalk? Councilor Schultz.
Me. Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, I'd make a motion that we deny the application at this time and do so without prejudice. Since we're in the process of drafting a procedure to deal with the request for balconies, I think it would be inappropriate. Well, first, that's my motion, that we deny the request at this time without prejudice.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to deny the application. Okay.
If I could speak just briefly on my motion.
Please.
First of all, I read the letter from the petitioner, and there is no nexus, at least on my part, between this project and Remy's Block. They both stand alone. They're both separate. my original objection to this was the historic nature of that building and the request that the planning department to come up with guidelines for this board. And they're in the process of doing that, and that's much appreciated. I just think it'd be inappropriate at this time for us to act while our own city staff is in the process of giving us better guidance to deal with this topic.
Thank you very much. Anyone else would like to comment? So we'll keep going around this way. Council Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think if we support the motion, number one, Councilor Sirleaf, I think we really need to be careful about this, because I think that we really have to have in place some standards. If we don't, and we have one-off proposals coming to us, we're really going to regret it in the years ahead as we look backward. We spent so much time, effort, and money to build our beautiful Main Street, and I really think that the whole balcony question has to be placed in the context of that, and particularly in the historic nature of our downtown. So those are my comments in support of the motion.
Thank you. Council Chamberlain.
Thank you, Your Honor. I also support the motion. I think that we're at the edge of a slippery slope here without defined guidelines for the imposition of balconies on our Main Street buildings, and that really is what it is. These are ahistorical impositions. In this particular building, I'm very sensitive about it because it's one of the most beautiful facades that we have. And I understand the desire of the applicant. I understand their imperative, but I think that it's in the best interest of the entire city and of our historic downtown, which, by the way, I would add, is one of our greatest assets in terms of attracting visitors, generating business, and sustaining our city. I think we really have to be very careful about these kinds of changes, and so I would hope that we could, in fact, come up with guidelines that preserve our downtown and not move forward at this moment with this request.
Councilor Krivik.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm also going to support the motion, and I know that we had spoken a little bit about this back in May with regards to what happened with Remy's Block as well as other projects that had come before the city that are anchors in our downtown. They went through the process of the planning board, they went through the process of architectural design review, heritage review, and then the project goes up and we issued an occupancy permit on something that wasn't in line with the plans. My original concern was I don't know what feet we stand on as a city that we allowed this to continue and we allowed them to basically take occupancy on a building, particularly Remy's Block, that was not part of the plans that were approved by our planning board. That being said, his block particularly was granted 79E tax relief for being a residential property. And that pro forma that was placed before the city council, or not before the city council, before city staff, we don't get to see the pro forma, was based on a certain value of that property. You and I do not know if the property was devalued because the balconies that they put in are lessening the value anticipated at the end of 79E. And I think that that's really important. But this project, specific to this project, I don't know from city administration if this applicant goes through the planning board, goes through architectural design review, goes through the Heritage Commission, and then puts in something different, what is the city going to do? And I echo what Councilor Champlin was saying, is that this is a historic downtown, and Councilor Warner, we invested a lot in our downtown, and I don't think this is something we just tread lightly on now. We saw a mistake coming directly out of the gate, and we need to pull back and say, hey, what are we doing here? With our city staff so close to bringing us a report, I would prefer to wait. Thanks.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to take a little different tack on this. Council Kretovic talked about how the balconies on Remy's project didn't meet the plans that were submitted to the city and that were approved. I think regardless of what Remy did or didn't do in relation to the approved plans, it was the responsibility of the city to step in and either say take it down or not issue a certificate of occupancy, or say to them, yeah, that's fine, go ahead. But at the end of the day, it was our responsibility to make the determination of whether or not those balconies should stay in the design that they're in now. To deny the project that's before us tonight because we didn't follow through on due diligence, I think has the potential to send a chill to other developers, that they go through the appropriate process, they go to the planning department, they get approval from ADR and go to the planning board, and then they come before the city council, and the city council says, nah, we're not crazy about that because we don't trust you. So I'm not inclined to support the motion. What I would support, is that I get the impression from the letter that we received about this project that they're willing to sit back down with the planning department and board and architectural design review and come up with a design that would meet the new regulations that have been approved by the planning board but haven't yet come before us. And I would be more inclined to soften the message that we send to other developers in saying that it is our guidance that we're sending this project back to be in compliance with the new regulations that are being worked out, as opposed to just outright denying it. Thank you, Your Honor.
Councilor Todd.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to support Councilor Shirtless' motion primarily for some of the reasons that were just cited, and I in fact don't want to send the wrong message to potential developers out there. And I don't feel comfortable as a member of this body making decisions on architectural review or handling potential future one-off cases like the zoning board adjustment does. I don't think that we're in the position to do that. And I also want to see the good work by the planning board continue and get those recommendations in before we can move forward in a uniform manner. So in fact, there will be no confusion from any potential developers. Thank you.
Councilor Credwick.
Thank you, Your Honor. The architect that is working with Remy had actually brought up the same thing that you said, that this applicant had gone through the process, going through the planning, going through architectural design review, going through Heritage Commission, and that he flew through those, and that council should have just rubber stamped it. That's not our job. We just took an oath tonight that said that we are supposed to do what we believe to be in the best interest of the city, our constituents, and to the ordinances of the city. And you know what? That failed. That project failed. You are right. The city was wrong. And you know what? We put a stop to it. That is not the path, Councilor Hirschlag. The path is the city council has the last say. And if you watch the planning board meetings, you will see Rich Woodfin say often, we approve it, now it's off to city council. We have the last voice. And this voice at that time was not in favor. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Nye.
Can we move the question, please, Your Honor?
You have one more person to raise their hand, and then we can move the question. Councilor Hirschlag.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just heard one of my fellow councilors say that we shouldn't be second-guessing the planning board and that we should be embracing the good work of the planning board. If that's the case, the planning board approved this project.
Anyone else? Sorry, I lied. Councilor Bourget.
Do you have a timeline on, or any idea when the planning board's going to come up with these guidelines? I mean,
Sure.
We have a lot of developers coming, and
Sure,
I think we should.
The planning board actually approved coming tonight to council to give a presentation of the draft of the design guidelines, because there was still some work that they had asked staff to do figuring out a strategy for some of the proposals in there. We decided to hold it off till next month. So right now I think we're in the ballpark of giving a presentation to council of what the recommendations are, asking council for some feedback on specific items, and then bringing it back to the planning board to either change certain things based on your feedback or for the planning board to approve it, as it is. So we're very close to, the document, other than a few items that they've asked us to do some further work on developing, again, a strategy and proposal for implementation, the design guidelines are essentially, they've come to a point where they're ready to present it.
Thank you.
And once they present, we're going to be presented with numerous decisions to make. Is that not correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. Question was moved. Thank you. So we're ready for the
May I
question?
ask a follow-up question?
You sure
Ron?
can.
Is it in the best interest of the applicant to remain this item on the table as opposed to voting it up and down?
So I will answer that, but I would ask Ms. Shank to answer as well. Because we're both in the room, and I want to make sure. It is my understanding that I asked on 3 separate occasions if the applicant wanted an up or down vote tonight, and the answer on all 3 occasions was yes. Is that your understanding?
Correct.
Sure.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd just like to ask Mr. Walsh. I spoke with you earlier today, and there was a bit of a discussion about unintended consequences if we were to vote this down. I'm wondering if you have any concerns about that.
Well, we'd be acting on one particular applicant. That's it. That's how I would see it. Because there's no guidelines that have been developed yet. We haven't voted on any guidelines. So each applicant would come before us, be a permit to go over the sidewalk, and we'd handle those as we do with anybody else in an open, transparent way. Did you see it differently than I do?
No, Your Honor. I think having standards in place so people know what the rules of the road are moving forward is helpful. There are obviously other projects that are coming down the pike, some which the council are aware of, some which you aren't. And I think the faster we can get some standards in place, so as people start investing in design of their projects, they'll know this moving forward. Developers usually get very upset when they've invested money into a design and then a rule comes along that forces them to have to go back and redesign something that can delay, have to cause reapprovals or new approvals or delay a project in another way. So I think having some standards in place, whatever those standards are, which I haven't seen what the draft is from the planning board yet, so I can't comment on those, but I think having standards in place sooner rather than later would be good for the city.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, ready for the, we have a motion before us. Ready for the question? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
And the ayes have it. Okay, that takes care of item 28. Now gets us to comments by councilors and myself. Anybody have any comments? Okay, no one? Ms. Bouchard?
I do. I want to thank, in the fall, I did an in-town Concord tour of the upstairs of Concord, and a part of the tour was the Remy building and the apartments, and it was very generous of everyone on the top floor to open up their homes for the tour. And they were lovely apartments, and a lot of young professionals live in there, so it's having the desired effect that we as a city want with building apartments that to be living downtown, and they all enjoy their balconies. So.
I appreciate those comments. You're absolutely right. It was nice for Remy to open up his building. The occupants of those apartments to open up their homes to us. I think he did an outstanding job with the building, and that's why I was proud to vote for granting him 79E for, I believe, 5 years to make that project works. That's why I'm proud of the fact the city supported him in his financial effort to support that project. That's why I'm proud of the fact the city actually worked to find leases for parking spaces for his tenants down there. I think the city has done an excellent job at supporting Remy and the project in Remy's block. So I thank you for saying that. Anyone else?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to mention that the Winter Carnival at White Park is coming up on January 20th. The Ugly Sweater 5K has been postponed this year, canceled this year, will be held next year. due to some conflicts.
Which ugliness.
Flashing sweaters.
Flashing sweaters, yeah, too many flashing sweaters. But we hope everyone will come out and enjoy the day.
I will say on behalf of Council Sherliff and I, we're both very disappointed because we said we were going to get in shape for 2018. That was going to be our first
Inaugural year.
inaugural coming out for the race.
You got another year.
You might
10K.
You might be lucky you have another year.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, anyone else?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to remind folks that the 8th annual Black Ice Pond Hockey Tournament will be January 26th through the 28th, assuming it's cold enough outside for ice.
Anyone else? Okay, I had 2 items. Number 1, this is the month in which I usually send you all a memo appointing a committee to deal with the manager's evaluation. I chose not to do that tonight because at the last evaluation last year, we talked about trying to find a new process that might be more beneficial to us as a council, the community, and the manager himself. I am going to ask you to look at your calendars for 2 items. Number 1, I'd like to get together for a committee as a whole to talk about that evaluation process, and I ask you all to bring your ideas on how we can best get the most information possible and create the most useful process for all parties involved. That was number 1. Second, I'd like to set a date tonight for priority agenda setting that we do every 2 years in January. Of course, this is a very important meeting that we always have because those priorities are what we give for direction to the manager and his team for the budget process and for other activities throughout the next 2 years. So if you could look at your calendars and see if you have Monday the 22nd and Monday the 29th available to meet for the purposes of you can pick which one you want to do when, but one of them would be for the manager evaluation review process. I thought it'd be easier to do as a committee of the whole instead of a committee. And the second would be for the priority agenda setting. 22nd, 29th, would that work for anybody?
Good.
Works for me.
Works for me.
Yeah, that's fine.
Stay with the Mondays and, okay. So 22nd will be for manager evaluation review. I don't anticipate that has to be a very long meeting because you're all going to do your homework and bring your best ideas, as well as the manager will be there. And on the 29th,
Meeting time?
Mr. Manager, will you bring your ideas?
Yes.
Will you discuss them ahead of time?
Yeah.
You share them ahead of
However you
time?
like.
it's fine.
If you like to get it.
Yeah, actually, I would. I see performance evaluations all the time, and I think that with your input, we can
Glad. Actually, I already did it all. It came out great.
Yes. Did you get an A?
So no, I could send out some examples
Thank
because
you.
that's what we talked about, is looking at different approaches and processes. So I'm glad.
As I said, I don't intend it to be a very long meeting. What's best?
7 o'clock, you're on?
What's easiest for everybody?
6?
6?
Earlier.
6.
6 be better for people?
Yes, please.
I can do it, sure.
Sure.
6?
Anybody?
For both meetings, Your Honor?
Sure, if that works for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think they're going to have to be here because typically we go to the golf course and
Winter League.
excuse me?
Winter League is on. Winter League at the golf course.
Winter League, yes. Thank you.
We won't have a place to meet.
Right. So as you know, we have 2 simulators which are being used at the golf course. So
Your Honor, the patio's open.
We'll keep it.
So let's just plan to meet here for both those meetings. So 6 o'clock on the 22nd, 6 o'clock on the 29th, here in council chambers.
Well,
Councilor Hirschlag.
thank you, Your Honor. Will both those meetings be either broadcast or taped?
You'll have to check with Concord TV.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, those are the 2 items I had. Are there any others? All right. Mr. Manager, do you have anything?
Yes, sir.
Actually, I have one other. I'll be reaching out to each of you to discuss committees and things you might be interested in over the next 2 years. Okay? So if I call, please answer your call. We have one item that's been removed from the consent. Madam Clerk.
It's item 22. It's been pulled from consent by Councilor Hirschlag. It's a resolution repurposing the sum of $10,000 from the golf course equipment replacement project, CIP number 530, to the golf course grounds improvement project, CIP number 235, for phase 1 of the irrigation project at the golf course.
Thank you very much. Councilor Hirschlag.
Thank you, Your Honor. I understand the necessity of moving forward with these capital projects at the golf course. But what's changed over the years is the golf course's ability to continue funding these projects. This year, regardless of the fact that it was or wasn't a good weather year, I think if we were to compare last year's numbers with this year's numbers, the golf course would still be in a difficult position financially. So I've had this discussion before with the council and the manager. What I'd like is that as the budget season approaches, when we start to look at the budget, that we look at some other suggestions as to what should or can be done with the golf course. Should we continue it? I mean, it's not operating any longer as an enterprise fund, and the further we get into the CIP, the more dire the funding becomes. We have over $2 million of expenses that are slated for the golf course through 2023, and in 2024. There's a notation in the CIP in 2023 for 2024 with the construction of a new clubhouse. So it's not that I'm in favor of getting rid of the golf course, selling it, or leasing it out, but I think those are all options that should be brought before us to take a look at what makes sense to the community going forward as to how the golf course is funded. So that as we go forward with the new budget, that the community is aware that of the input of funding that they'll be putting into the golf course, since it's no longer able to meet all its expenses. I think it's a valuable asset, but I think we owe it to the community to be very upfront about how we anticipate funding this over the next 5 or 10 years. Thank you, Your Honor.
So let me ask you a question. So I'm really confused because I heard both things. You said you were not necessarily in favor of for selling the land, developing the land, but you are not in favor of funding projects which maintains our property to continue operation there. So what are you looking to do? I'm confused. You don't want to get rid of it, but you don't want to maintain it. What do you want?
So I'm a little confused because I don't recall, I'll have to go back and look at the tape when it becomes available, but I don't recall saying I wasn't willing to fund it. What I said is that the golf course is no longer able to fund itself. What I also said is that I believe we owe it to the community that if we're going to use general funds to pay for golf course expenses, that we have a rigorous discussion.
So the discussion would be whether or not to fund it or not, right?
It would not, well, I don't think we have...
So if you don't fund it, then you choose not to maintain it.
The discussion, as I stated earlier, would be on where the funding would come from. Does it make sense to lease, would we consider leasing the golf course, or would we consider selling it or developing it?
Who would you lease it to? So you'd privatize it?
All I'm asking for, Your Honor...
I'm trying to understand what you want to do.
I think I was pretty clear. I think there's
obviously,
a number...
I'm still asking questions, so I clearly didn't understand what you're saying. I'm trying to understand.
If you have a business that is no longer able to sustain itself, to pay for itself, it's operating in the red, do you continue to operate in the red? Do you look for an angel to add funding? Do you sell that business? Do you shut it down? I think that's what would happen in the private sector. The idea of having an enterprise account, an enterprise fund, was that the golf course would pay for itself. It'd be a self-sustaining activity. It isn't any longer, and it doesn't appear that it will be in the future. I think it brings a lot to the community, but I also think, as I said earlier, that we owe it to the taxpayers of this community to have an open and vigorous discussion if we're going to be spending their money to support the golf course. I think we should put all the options on the table.
Well, I strongly concur with your comment about having a good, vigorous discussion about whether or not the community wants to support these things. And I believe we do that every budget session, just like the library doesn't make money. The library is an important asset in this community as far as I'm concerned, and I wouldn't want to shut the library. But it doesn't make money, it doesn't sustain itself, and I could probably give you numerous examples of things that the community supports but doesn't necessarily support itself.
Is the library an enterprise fund?
But I think that those discussions you know what? I was respectful when you spoke to give you the chance to speak. I would simply ask you give me the same courtesy to let me speak as well. So I think that we can actually have those discussions during the budget process, and I encourage that vigorous discussion. Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to be clear myself that the discussion I thought tonight was about funding some monies for the golf course tonight, and that what Councilor Hirschlag was talking about is absolutely an important discussion, but we do that during the budget process, don't we? That's when that's done. So tonight, we're just talking about this particular
repurpose of dollars.
Right. So that's what this is. So I'm not sure if Councilor Hirschlag's for repurposing the dollars tonight for this or not, but
Councilor Hirschlag, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. I think at this juncture, it's important to continue to move forward with the golf course. I just wanted to be clear that before we get too far down the road and we can't turn away from it, if that would be the determination, that we should have that vigorous discussion. I'd also like to point out that the library is not an enterprise fund. The library was never set up to be self-sustaining. The library was always set up to use community and taxpayer dollars to support it.
Councilor Credit.
Thank you, Your Honor. I've been on the Golf Advisory Board, I think, for about 6-7 years now. And at one time, the golf course was funding $90,000 per year out of our funding to the general fund and making us insolvent. And so over the course of this time, we've done a number of changes, and we continue to make changes. It hasn't even been 6 months since we took some of the responsibility away from David Gill so he could concentrate his efforts on the community center up on the Heights, and given over those responsibilities to our deputy city manager in charge of finance to help us turn the golf course around. But if the expectation is in the middle of the winter, when we are no longer collecting golf revenue, that we suddenly be able to be solvent in an enterprise fund, while we are bringing in new revenue in the golf simulator and looking at other opportunities to bring in revenue from different sources, that we're not meeting your expectation, and that's unfortunate. But I think that we've had multiple rigorous discussions with regards to the golf course, and I would have hoped that you would know the long-term plan going forward. The Golf Course Advisory Committee also is charged with putting together a 5-year plan that we review every year. And the Golf Advisory Committee just met in December and started having discussions about that. The last time we met, we put together a priority list with the Recreation Department as well about what are the priorities at the golf course that we feel are necessary. The irrigation system was number 1. The parking lot was number 2. The clubhouse that you're referring to is 6 years out. It's not in the 5-year plan. And so it is not up for review at this time. There's a very standard process that's laid out in the ordinance that we follow as a committee, and I feel as though we've shorted you our knowledge. But I think we've tried to keep you up to date and informed. But with regards to this specific item that's in front of us, this is an item that I would move we approve this evening. Thank you.
So is that a motion?
Yes, it is.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Is there any further discussion? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just can't help myself because it's really a matter of procedure I want to talk about. And since it's the beginning of a new term, I'm hoping just to clear the air in some respects. I mean, from what I gather, we have something removed from the table that involves simply repurposing $10,000. So it's not allocating new monies, it's just taking a pot of money that's only $10,000 and moving it to a different pot within the same line item, basically, the golf course. And all the other concerns you have may be valid concerns, but I'm not sure why, A, you wouldn't bring them up during our priority discussion that we're going to have, January 29th, where we put all these things on the table and talk about the bigger items, the bigger picture, or B, talk about it during the budget process. And we get confused because you take these things off the table for these minor things and then say you're going to vote for it anyway. So, we just discussed this for 20 minutes when you're really going to vote for it anyway. And if you want to have the bigger discussion on the bigger picture of what we should do with the golf course or Memorial Field or any other issue, I think we have other forums like the priority setting forum that we're going to have January 29th to discuss those big picture items. So hopefully in the future, if we can kind of pick or choose or, talk about what your big picture items are and everybody else's big picture items and talk about it in a different venue rather than picking apart one tiny little thing that you're going to end up voting for anyway.
Okay, we have a motion before us. Motion's been seconded. Are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. We have one item for suspense. I'm going to motion to take up suspense 1.
So moved.
Motion made and seconded to suspend the rules to take up suspense 1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Madam Clerk, item suspense 1, please.
It's a report authorizing the city manager to grant a license to the New Hampshire Police Association to maintain an accessible walkway ramp on a portion of city-owned property abutting 8 Center Street in Concord.
Seems self-explanatory, but Mr. Manager, do you have anything to add?
It is, and we would terminate the existing license for that same structure.
Okay.
So terminate and then put a new license in place.
Okay.
Something that's already there.
Move approval.
Second. Motion made and seconded to approve this item. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Motion is adopted. And I believe that takes us to the end of the meeting tonight. I want to thank everybody. Congratulations, everybody, on your victories. I appreciate your service for the next 2 years. Simply remind everybody we'll be meeting again on the 22nd at 6 o'clock, and then again on the 29th. Can I get a motion to go into non-public session in accordance with RSA 91A, 32G, to discuss property acquisition? Motion made and seconded. Discussion, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. We'll be going into non-public session. Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone coming tonight.